Good journalists have the funnest job of any job in the whole wide world. You get to talk to people that few other people have access to. You get to attend events that few others get to attend. You know so much about the world, or else the community or the region, that other folks don't. You get to see what connections are made with each different story and how the big picture ends up looking. And you get to tell the country the big picture. You get to be able to say, based upon what this person has said and this person has done and that what this has happened, looks to me like this is what's going on. And how many people are you helping across the country, across the state, even in your local community, when you are able to uncover something that is a social ill and it's brought to light in an honest way and in a good way, so that government or social entities can correct what has been a problem, and it makes it better for the community in the future. News organizations pretty much felt that the decisions they made were the best decisions that could be made, and there really weren't ethics codes within each newsroom, whether it was broadcast or print or magazine. And so over time, though, transparency became more and more important. Transparency being that your audience understands the decisions that you make and why you make these decisions, and sometimes the situations that are compounded as you try to mull through each decision. So over time, journalists began to have ethics codes within their newsrooms. Journalism organizations had ethics codes, but they weren't necessarily, they didn't have teeth. They could guide journalists, but there weren't any repercussions for it. The newsroom codes would oftentimes have repercussions. And journalists would read them and think about them, because everybody thinks they're ethical. Everybody thinks that they have the highest sense of morality than the next person over. But as we all know, we have differing levels. I mean, if you think about in college how some of your friends do some things that you don't want to do because it's not quite right, but they think it's okay. But yet in the classroom, everybody thinks that they have the same level of high decision making. So ethics codes are a way of making journalists think about situations before they encounter them. And of course, as we have journalists going into professional newsrooms, we want to have ethics classes in our schools of journalism so that students can think about things even more so before they encounter them, and have good discussions, with their classmates and also with an instructor. So yes, I think now codes of, ethics classes are required in, I think, almost every university that has a journalism program. Well, there are a lot of good philosophical frameworks, and frankly, the classical ones are still the best. When it comes to the golden mean, in other words, I don't go to this extreme, I don't go to this extreme, but let me, somewhere in between. When it comes to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that one is also still a good one. When it comes to Rawls's veil of ignorance, you don't think about somebody's social class, their cultural background, or anything like that. You think of everybody as being equal and having equal stakes in the situation. When it comes to having a social contract, that's how society works nicely with one another. If you help me and open the door here, I'll be glad to help you and open the door there. If I help report on some type of a news situation and I am respectful and identify myself, then my interviewer is more likely to come forth because they have a better idea of trust. So that's a little bit about social contract. John Stuart Mills had his utility theory, and that was mainly what is the greatest good for the greatest number. So I guess when it comes to reporting on, covering different situations, the one I like best is when I have an ethical dilemma, it's a matter of who does it help and how many, who does it hurt and how many. And sometimes there's a trade-off but usually you can figure out the answer and what the decision should be based upon it may hurt one or two folks in that it sullies their reputation, but it will help a whole community who learn from this person's mistakes. Sometimes you have to think about the quantity or the quality of who it hurts or who it helps. If one person, for example, may commit suicide because of the things that they have done and the way in which society might react, then is that story really worth it, or does one have to go back and think about what is the objective of the story? Is it to really point a finger at somebody, or is it for our community to learn about a situation that may happen, and how do we best alleviate that situation for in the future? What is the social good that can come about from reporting on a story? Journalists are made up of people who write and are great visual communicators. That means you have journalists who are designers and writers and videographers, information graphic folks. You've just got, journalism is any which way in which one presents news. And so they have to think about their news and the information that they're giving in different ways depending upon their area of specialization. So they need to be knowledgeable about all the different ethical dilemmas that can come up, especially the common ones, conflict of interest, plagiarism. Conflict of interest, by the way, has quite a few different subtopics underneath that. There is, checkbook journalism, and, to think about what if this were me that were being reported on, or would I want somebody saying this about my mother or my sister or my brother? The same questions that, that I'm asking. So. Yeah, there are a variety of different things to think about when it comes to the different media and the ethics. The ethical decisions should always be the same. They should always be of high character and great thoughtfulness. And depending upon the medium, one has different types of ethics to think about. What is this visual saying and showing, and what's in the background? Am I giving a shot of a strike at the Capitol that looks like it's full of people, but yet in reality that was the crowd, the 20 people? For example, and I'm going to hedge over into plagiarism, it is so easy now to just copy and paste and when one is online, and if it is out there for everyone to see, then why can't I just use it for my my story? But the problem is that an audience member said something with a different purpose or a different intent or a different audience than what you are picking it up out of context and putting it over into a different context, and therefore changing the meaning sometimes by isolating that context away from that statement. Online is open to anyone and everyone, and frankly it's interesting how a lot of people that do news stories online don't think about the greater picture. They usually think about the audience that they're wanting to reach, and they forget that there are all these other people out there as well. And so it's really important to even more so be aware of one's audience and what one is saying and all the different ways in which what one says is being received. A journalist should always identify him or herself when they are starting to interview somebody. And that is a part of being transparent, so that the interviewee knows that what they say may appear in a public arena someplace, whether it's online or in a newspaper or broadcast. There should never be any doubt that something is not on the record. On the record means that they know that it might be used. You're not saying something in confidence to a journalist and then later on worry, will that be used or not be used? So that way you never have to worry about attribution or unidentified attribution, anonymous attribution, or is there going to be a problem later with somebody saying, I thought we had an agreement? After all, do you want to interview this person later on for another story. Maybe this is a government official, so you sometimes have to think not in the here and now, but also in the long term of your relationship, professional relationship with that individual. In my book, checkbook journalism is never very good. It's not, first of all, it sets a bad precedent. Because if one does it, then maybe another does it, then another does it, and pretty soon it becomes standardized. And what about those news organizations who can't afford to pay? And that's not even the worst of it. When it comes to checkbook journalism, sources sometimes feel that they want to give more information and as much information as possible because they are being paid for it. And so sometimes it becomes very elaborate. And then you don't exactly know where the truth is sometimes being stretched, even with good intentions. Sometimes with checkbook journalism, if it becomes too much of commonplace, then folks don't want to say anything without being paid. And I think that, frankly, checkbook journalism ruins the spirit of what journalists are trying to do. Journalists are trying to get news and information to the community, whether it's local or a global community. That type of information that gives news, information about where they live, their government, things that are happening all around, so that these community members can make good decisions to lead productive lives. And when we start giving money to people to give us information, is it starting to ruin the spirit of what journalism is all about in a democratic society? When it comes to freebies, freebies and junkets, freebies being, oh, look at this, maybe I'll send in trays full of cookies to your newsroom every single morning. And then a week later, if there is something nefarious that has happened with my bake shop, are you going to cover it objectively? Because I've already given you some warm fuzzies about my bake shop because I've been nice about giving you cookies every morning. Or is it that I take the journalist, I may be a government official, I take a journalist out, I give him or her a wonderful lunch, lots of drinks, which is a problem in and of itself there. But is it starting to produce, nice, warm fuzzy feelings, and can the journalist be objective? Everybody assumes they can be objective, and everybody assumes that they can divide the difference between being a good reporter and starting to have biased feelings, toward that individual. So, but subconsciously, it's very hard to be friends as opposed to just being, friendly with somebody. Let me take the example of, let's see, certainly sports is one, also when it comes to travel. So if, as a journalist, I were to travel to Jamaica, and I were to stay in a lovely hotel, and meanwhile the airline has paid for my trip, the hotel has said, hey, you can stay here free, and so therefore I have now been identified as somebody who will put things in the news and publicity, and maybe they feel will make or break their good image. So I am given the finest of foods. I have mints on my bed every night, and it's turned, and the sheets are turned down. I'm told about wonderful jaunts and trips and side trips, and given everything free. And so I come back and I write a story about that. And was I given the average experience that an average individual would have? No. I have, as an individual, I sometimes have hassles when I travel. I have hassles with the airlines. I sometimes have been given the wrong rooms. I sometimes have not had the greatest food. My side trips certainly have not been paid for. So if a journalist were to experience it the way that an average individual would experience it, they can give a much more objective story and really, really help audiences more. Being able to separate the newsroom from the advertising room has long been a tradition in news organizations, and there's a good reason for that. You don't want one to bias the other. And so again, one has to think back to the spirit of journalism and to what is its objectives. What's the objective for a story? What's the objective of journalism? And that's, again, to give news and information to community members so that they can make good decisions on ways in which to lead productive lives. And if you are silencing a story because you're worried about advertising dollars, then that is not rising to the aspirations of good journalism. And frankly, sooner or later it gets out. Somebody else either publishes that story and you didn't, or it gets out that you knew about it and you didn't, or the information gets out and community members wonder why you didn't. So, and frankly, when a hard story like that is done, it actually brings a lot more respect from community members as well as those commercial entities that you're worried about offending. And frankly, what it does sometimes is brings forth something that maybe management didn't even know about. And then they are able to rectify that, and everybody is happy, you know, afterward. And there are ways to write up stories without truly offending people at the moment. I mean, if you're worried about practices, you ask somebody who's just retired. That way they're not going to be losing their job. So there are all sorts of ways to get at the same type of information, but the line should not be blurred between commercialism or advertising within a news organization and those news stories that they cover. Journalism is made up of wonderfully good ethical decisions that are made every day by thousands of great journalists. It's every now and then the bad apples that, you know, are publicized that make it seem like, oh, here's another journalism problem. But again, that is so minuscule and compared to the great many good decisions that are made every day. Journalists don't even realize all the good decisions that they have to make. When so many events happen within a community, how do you choose just to cover this one or this one? And then when you decide on this news story, how do you decide what angle to take? And then once you decide what angle to take, who do you interview? There are many different sides to this story. How many people can you interview from each side? What type of questions are you going to ask? Who gets quoted? Who gets quoted first? How much of the quote do you cut? Who goes on the second page? Or who goes, you know, on the cutting room floor? What type of visual do you put with what this person is saying? Is it a long shot? Is it a medium shot? Is it a close-up? Do you do an information graphic at the same time? Do you talk about if you were involved or not involved? Or, you know, a great many things like that. So there are ethical decisions being made just like this all the time in a journalist's job every day. And again, I want to emphasize that they do make so many good ethical decisions. We do hear about the ones that are not, but that's because we all hope to learn from them. Victims in the Media program has been known throughout the country because of being unique. I would say that one of the objectives of the Victims in the Media program here at Michigan State University is to introduce students to, again, situations that they might encounter before they actually do, but to understand why certain decisions are better than other decisions. And I would say that one of the objectives of the Victims in the Media program is to say, don't forget the victim, but also don't keep making that victim a victim. Many folks want to say, instead of somebody being a victim, that they are a survivor. Or when somebody has assaulted somebody else, then or do we keep the story based upon the person who has been the aggressor and then just forget about the other person who has experienced something very traumatic physically, mentally, and emotionally that actually will stay with them perhaps for the rest of their lives? Usually aggressors commit one crime after the other and do not have the same ethical compass as other folks in our society. I think the Victims in the Media program also, in addition to helping students understand what is going on with a victim and how emotional it is, but also how to interview folks. For example, as a journalist, if I go to the parents of someone who has had a child who has been murdered, then Do I understand that with post-traumatic stress that these parents may not remember that they even talked to me within the first day or 2 or 3 or week? And if I quote them and they come back to me later saying, I never said this, they're not lying, they truly did not believe it. Or if I interview somebody who has just been sexually assaulted, I need to make sure that I do not touch that person, because they have just been touched in an aggressive manner that has created a horrible incident in their life. So students learn you don't go forward and touch somebody even though you want to say it's all right by patting them or hugging them or being close to them. So those are some things. Also, it's nice that a journalist learns to let the victim have some control over the interview itself. They have just lost control, which is what happened when they were sexually assaulted. They need to regain some type of control. So where would they like to be interviewed? What are some things that they would like to say, or what are some of the things that they would like to be made known? It's not also the here and now that we need to think about when it comes to victims. It's also the anniversary of a year later when we report that this person still has not been found. What does that do to that person's parents every anniversary, bringing the trauma back? So I think that what we try and do with the Victims in the Media program is not have the victim or the victim's family traumatized again by what we put in the news. We hear from students all the time. Once they have graduated, they call back saying, guess what happened to me? I am so glad that I didn't, make the wrong decision because we had already thought about it ahead of time. Students who graduate from the School of Journalism at Michigan State University are always welcomed to call back when it comes to their faculty. We love hearing from students and how they're doing. We never stop wanting to help our students be a success in the world. And we hear from students who have graduated 10 years ago saying, I ran into this situation, what do you think? And so we try and talk about it with them. But students should never hesitate and never ever think that the doors have closed from their faculty or from the School of Journalism once they have graduated. We're here for you.